All right, so today we're going to talk about Saturn in astrology, both in the natal chart and in transit. What does he mean on that fundamental level? So yesterday we talked about Jupiter, which is about the polarity of Saturn, which is about expansion. It's about seeing what's possible, having that optimistic and wise perspective on life. Now, Saturn essentially is still very much about that overarching perspective. So both planets are about that top-down. But the difference between Jupiter and Saturn is where Jupiter wants to expand, Saturn energy, and this is an aspect of ourselves, wants to contract, wants to create, wants to restrain in order to have definition. One way I like to think of Jupiter and Saturn in astrology is that, if you think of sacred geometry, you've got Jupiter, which represents the color, right? It's just the light kind of going off into every direction. Then you've got Saturn, who is the definition in there, maybe the lack of light, or where the light kind of took a turn or changed a hue or something like that. And that gives it the definition because, light by itself, it's just the whole color spectrum. But once you have the definition and the curvature and the different designs, then you actually have something that you might consider art or a creation or sacred geometry, for example. So very important when you combine these two elements, and like I said with Jupiter, they're outer planets, so they have a lot to do with more of the unconscious, deeper aspects of self, not so much in personality, again, depending on the house placement. If it's in house, definitely personality, but as an energy in and of itself, it's much more about how we create our experiences, on a bigger picture, especially from the top-down perspective. So that's pretty much the polarity, expansion with Jupiter, contraction with Saturn, and you can get some more clues about what Saturn represents by looking at him in the sky. So first things first is he's the dimmest star, or the dimmest planet rather, that we can see with the naked eye, but he's also the last planet we can see with the naked eye. So there's this new gap we're about to go into from Saturn to the trans-Saturn planets, Uranus and Neptune and so forth. So one thing about Saturn, he's kind of the end of everything that is visible, right? So he represents kind of the domain or the end of everything physical, everything real, everything that you can actually visualize. So that's essentially a good way of looking at Saturn. He's kind of the master of the physical realm. So it's about where we can create, physicality, where we can have a slow and steady and dense and disciplined approach in order to make things into a reality. Because again, like Jupiter, for example, if it's just inspiration, if it's just motivation, well, there's nothing really there until you actually turn it into something practical and real. And that's one element of Saturn. The other element too is Saturn's gorgeous rings. They're made of ice and stone, mostly ice though. So this is very cold, and this is a big quality about Saturn is that Saturn's approach and our approach in the natal chart is in that cold and sort of distant way, kind of emotionally distant, just very cold and calculating. So the reason for that is because we're able to actually see things for how they are, and it's just reality. There's no emotional hue to it. It just is what it is. And so we see it, we work with it. It's the area of our life where we can really have that stern approach that's sometimes needed in order to create things that are long-lasting. In other words, where we have not necessarily short-term gains and short-term pleasures, but long-term gains and long-term pleasures, right? So we have that disciplined energy there. And the rings are essentially creation. It takes a very long time to create those rings, and they're beautiful. And it's a reminder that through that hard work and discipline, we can create beautiful things in life, but they do take time. They do take hard work. So these are some of the things that you can gain from Saturn, and essentially he's showing us where in our chart we're willing to work hard, where we're willing, and it doesn't always come across as easy, but there's an aspect of ourselves where we are willing to work hard there, and it is very important for us to do that. And just like I was talking about with Jupiter, bringing in Saturn into Jupiter really helps refine Jupiter. Here with Saturn, where it is that colder part of the chart, bringing in Jupiter really helps. So bringing in inspiration, bringing in buoyancy, bringing in optimism to wherever Saturn is in your chart can really go a long ways. So let's take an example. Let's say someone has Saturn in their 4th house. This would be the house of home, family, and also health. So it would be important for this individual, individual, and I think naturally they do take seriously the home matters, family matters, health matters, anything relating to tradition or past or history or their roots in some sense. Again, that's the area of life. So their approach to that could be very long lasting. Again, anything in that area does tend to come later in life too as they develop those qualities. So here perhaps the emotional qualities and foundational qualities of the fourth house. So let's look at a sign with this. Let's say Saturn in Aries. Okay, so Aries is a very outward, very action-oriented sign. So here the slow and steady approach is actually very much about short bursts of action, right? So the way in which the individual in this example expand the home and family stuff over time, it'll be through those short bursts of energies, that motivation, that drive, that inspiration, where they're taking it one step at a time, but it's small victories in the process. And so they could be, again, kind of competitive in the process. They could be, seeing how they can remove obstacles and all of that stuff that Aries is associated with in order for them to build that long-lasting, area of life. So hopefully this helps you guys. As always, if you have any questions, do comment down below, and I'll see you guys all next time for Uranus. Take care.